Cool, cool.
Hello, everyone. It is Fiona here from FionaMarks.com, and I am finally back with my friend and colleague, Fernando. Fernando, as always, I'd like to ask you to say hello to everyone and introduce yourself.
Hello to everyone. My name is Fernando, and I'm really glad to be back here with you in your channel, Fiona. Thank you very much for inviting me once again.
I'm very pleased to have you, and I want to acknowledge right off the bat the success that you guys have just had in the Hispanic
Ah,
speaking world
thank
with
you.
your conference. I believe you guys have just had a conference. Do you want to say a little something about that?
Sure. We just made the first traditional astrology conference in Spanish, internationally speaking. We did it online. We had 9 astrologers from 7 countries. We did 2 workshops, 9 conferences, and 2 roundtables over 3 days. And we had almost over 500 people plugged in and saw it from different countries around the world. So it's really good to finally do something officially for the first time in terms of traditional astrology for the Spanish speaking world. And if you speak Spanish, you just look it up. It's called COAT 2021, just like in English, COAT, COAT 2021. And there are a couple of videos out there. COAT stands for Congreso Online de Astrología Tradicional, which would be like the online congress of traditional astrology. And it's the first activity we do. I did it with a couple of associates of mine from Spain, and it's the first one we do, and hopefully we're gonna repeat it in the future.
I hope so too. And I really appreciate having all of your, experience with traditional astrologies here on the channel. It's a great
Thank you.
chance to pick your brain. And
No, and thank you for inviting me at the same time.
I'll put the link to Coat
Oh, sure.
in the
I
description.
have a playlist, so I'll
Great.
share it with you.
Great. It's just in case anybody here would like to follow up with that. Now, I am here actually to talk to you once again about traditional astrology and the differences to Vedic astrology. And this is based on your video from a little while ago now. We're moving on to being serious astrologers now, Fernando. It's a little while since you and I graduated, but in one of your videos for the Year 4 apprenticeship, you really opened our eyes and gave us lots of things to think about where there are similarities and differences between what we think of as Vedic astrology now and either traditional astrologies or modern Western astrology as well. And one of the ones that was really of interest to me was about timing systems, because Vedic astrology is kind of famous perhaps for having the dasha systems, or for having Vimshatari dasha. Maybe that's something that people, when they think of a standout feature that maybe relates to Vedic astrology that perhaps Western modern astrology doesn't use, that's one of the things that people might think. But it's not the only dasha system in Vedic astrology, and it's also not the only timing system that's used in various astrologies. It has its strengths and it has its weaknesses. So can you give us a bit of perspective
Oh, sure.
on dashas and maybe other timing systems as well?
Yeah. Let me begin with an anecdote. When I came into astrology about, 11, 12 years ago, I was fascinated with Jyotish because I said, wow, this is just much more than just your solar sign. There are timing techniques, dashas, that blew my mind. And for me as a neophyte, I was just in awe of the idea that astrology had timing systems. For me, that was amazing because I really didn't care about, you know, sun in Leo, you're going to be like the center of attention and you're going to be very out there. I really didn't care about that. But the idea of being able to manage time and knowing when things are going to come, just like you being aware of the climate, right? Of the
Yes,
weather.
yes.
That for me, that was amazing. For me, that was power. For me, that was science. For me, that was knowledge and wisdom. And that is one of the many reasons why I got into Jyotish as a traditional not as a traditional astrologer, but as someone who wanted to learn traditional astrology. And as time went on, I figured out that in Jyotish, there are other timing systems besides dashas, right? There are Shara dashas, and there are sign dasha systems,
Yes.
and there are Janma Nakshatra dasha systems. So Vimshottari is just one of 10 dashas that Parashara gives in the second volume of Brihat Parashara Horashastra, which are based on the Janma Nakshatra, which is the nakshatra of the natal moon, which are extrapolations from the lunar mansions, sometimes with the 27 or the 28 scheme of lunar mansions. That is one timing system we use in Jyotish. The other one is the sign system, which is just dashas based on signs, which is very interesting because we're going to see that that has a lot to do with how timing systems were used in Hellenistic astrology. Now, there are other timing systems in Jyotish, but they come later on from Perso-Arab Islamic astrology. But the idea here is that as time went on, I realized that Bimshodari was just the tip of the iceberg. There were other timing systems, but many people didn't know how to use them, right? Um, there were at the same time different systems of timing that were extrapolated from different astronomical phenomena. So I
Okay.
was like, oh, wow, this is really interesting. But then, as I kept studying and as I widened my horizons, I realized that there were a lot of other timing systems that are not used in Jyotish
Mhm.
and much
Yeah.
older and much simpler and much logical, right? And that is when I realized that dashas are an anomaly to a certain degree, because the idea of doing a timing systems with the lunar mansions is really for lack of a better word, weird, right? And it's something that it's not used in other astrologies as the Indians use it, right? And I
Mm.
believe that has to do a lot with the sidereal zodiac, the idea of how the lunar mansions are, you know let's say, the uh, result of a very, 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 very ancient astrology based on the nakshatras that was pure to India, that then got mixed with the Hellenistic precepts of uh, horoscopic astrology. Now, then I learned other timing systems which are used in Jyotish, but they're not really exploited, which are much simpler and much more logical. One of them are perfections, right? We have perfections in Jyotish. There's used under different systems. And at the same time, there are Shara, Dasha system. I'm sorry, sign timing systems that use to a certain degree the same ideas as perfections. For those who do not know, perfections are probably the oldest timing system ever. And it's the idea that each house represents a year of your life, starting with the ascendant. That's why the time of birth is so important for horoscopic astrology. So, the first year of your life, from the moment you come out of your mother till the first year of your life, is the first house. Then the first to the second year is the second house, and then so on and so on and so on, and then you come back to the first house and it's 12 years, and
Okay.
then you come back to the first house and it's 24 years, and then you do again 36, 48, 60, 72, 84, and so on, right? And so on and so forth until you die, right? Obviously those perfections are subjected to other timing systems in terms of knowing the arc of life, right? And knowing how things are gonna span out. But that is a timing system that is much more logical, much more simpler than that we usually do not see that much mentioned in Jyotish, because dashas have their predominance, specifically Vimshodari, which is once again just one of 10 timing systems based on the Janma Nakshatra, but it's the most popular one. But there are other timing systems which are really interesting. For example, we have Firdarias, which probably came from Perso-Arab astrology, which probably influenced dashas, right? And a friend of mine, Ashwin Balaji, just published a book related to Firdarias and how they relate. And Firdarias is just like dashas to a certain degree, but they're much more simpler. They're not based on lunar mansions. They're based on the chart per se. If you were born during the day, then your Firdaria starts with the sun because you are a day chart. And then you follow the Chaldean order of the planets. You go Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and then you go to the nodes, and then you start again with the sun if you live that long, right? And some people say there is a relation to the dashas, but people are not sure if dashas influence Firdarias or Firdarias influence dashas. That is really interesting, and I do not have that expertise. And at the same time, if you were born during the night, then you start with the moon. So it would be the moon following the Chaldean order. So it would be moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and then I think you do the nodes after Mercury, or you do the nodes after the Sun. I'm not sure about that. But the point is that if you can notice, if you were born during the night, you're gonna have the Fidarias of the Saturn and Mars first. So nighttime births in principle are probably going to have a more difficult time during early age, right? While day births are going to have probably a little bit more difficulty at late age if they reach that age, right? But once
Okay.
again, there are other timing systems which we don't see in Jyotish, which are really cool. We talked about Firdarias. We talk about perfections, and we also have solar returns, which we do have in Jyotish. And as I mentioned, these are other timing systems that we do have in Jyotish, but that came later on with the Perso-Arab Islamic tradition, which are known in Jyotish as Tajik astrology or Varsafala astrology, right?
Yep.
Tajik is basically the Persian word for Tajik was the Persian word for Arab, but Tajik is the Sanskrit word for Persian. So technically, though that is basically the last development of traditional Jyotish, how that came into be, and how to a certain degree it's just basically traditional non-Vedic astrology in Jyotish, where you have the traditional Ptolemaic aspects. And what you do is that whenever the sun comes to the same degree, same minute, and same second you were born, you raise a chart, and that chart will rule the year at hand. And that is a very good timing system. Then you mix that with perfections, and then you see the solar return chart with the Lord of the Year, which would be the Lord of the Perfection, with the Lord of the Ascendant of the solar chart. And then you have a lot of things going on, which were developed by Perso-Arab astrologers. And that is not Jyotish, that comes from the Islamic context, which is probably the end result of perfections from the Hellenistic being, mastered throughout the centuries and being mixed with the solar return chart. But you gotta also understand that traditionally speaking, solar return charts is when the sun comes to the degree it was when you were born. But in really ancient Hellenistic times, solar return charts were very interesting, but because you had to wait till the sun got to the sign it was in your natal chart, and then wait till the moon gets to the exact degree, minute, and second it was when you were born. So that was left behind, and you just use the sun. And obviously, there's other timing system, which is basically progressions, not perfections, progressions, which is the idea that each year of your life is one day after you were born. So you would see the changes of the planets ingressing into different signs. And at the same time, there are other timing systems based on progressions, specifically with the terms of the ascendant and how the ascendant changes through the terms, and how that is predetermined. That predetermines how that timing cycle would go. Of course, that would change depending on the term systems you use, or bounds as they are also called. So as you can see, there are a lot of other timing systems in traditional astrology which we do not see in Jyotish. And at the same time, there are a lot of timing systems in Jyotish that we do not use, and that a lot of Vedic astrologers do not use because they don't know how to use them. Not because they're ignorant or lack skill, it's just because they're there and they have never been exploited or explored. Basically, what you use in Jyotish mainly is Vimshottari. You can use Sharadasha. You can use Yogini. But besides that, there's not a lot more going on. And a lot of astrologers sometimes use these techniques that I told you about, and they mix it with the Jyotish. So it's very important to see that Vimshottari is not the only timing system in Jyotish. And at the same time, the timing systems in Jyotish are not the only ones. There are others and much more simpler, which sometimes we see in Jyotish, but sometimes we do not.
It's kind of complex, isn't it, Fernando?
Yeah.
Because really it's the human mind trying to understand when will things happen.
Oh yeah. And at the same time, it's difficult because if we if we start from the traditional perspective, then this knowledge came from God, or somehow it came from God, or somehow it came from somebody who had a direct connection to the transcendence. But that was very, 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 very long ago, right? Taking into consideration this perennial wisdom point of view. And at the same time, how it just has gotten, diluted through time. You know that exercise they do in
Yep.
team buildings where they give a
Yep.
secret
Yep.
and they pass it, and at the beginning it was like, I don't know, Mary wants soup, and at
Yep.
the end it's like, I have
Yep.
a helicopter, something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, that's the human mind also, how imperfect we are and how we change stuff, and how
Definitely.
that reflects our fallen state, right? Which is
Yep.
something that most religions partake and understand.
Yep. And even for astrologers, possibly not so much in India, but maybe more in the West, there's a lot of threat during the previous centuries if astrologers are predicting the future.
Yeah.
And if it is accurate, that would be considered very threatening to
Yeah.
the European culture of the time.
It was
And
called fortune telling laws, specifically in Anglo countries,
yeah,
in and also Germanic countries, Germany, in the States. Yeah, that's something that Protestants did more than Catholics. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that's
totally,
something.
totally, totally,
Yeah, that's something
totally.
that's
But
very puritanical of
yes,
Protestants. Catholics don't care. They drink. They
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
They don't care.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah.
But that means that that process that you're talking about, that in Australia we call that Chinese whispers, the game, and in Portuguese we call it broken telephones, like
Oh,
telephones trocados.
nice.
I don't know what you call it in Spanish, but
Teléfono roto.
roto. Okay, and that process of not. I say that astrologers in Europe were using those techniques accurately 500 years ago or 700 years ago. I don't know when. But the process of this, your life being threatened by predicting,
Oh yeah.
means that those broken telephones of telling that story and
Oh yeah.
passing down, it's really made that
And also irresponsible astrologers, charlatans, right? Gypsies, that sort of stuff, right? Fake fortune tellers. I mean, you have a lot of those.
yeah.
So
So
those laws came into be not only because of religious reasons, also because of social valid reasons. And this is why, after the 19th and the early 20th century, many astrologers focused more on psychological profiling in terms of the natal chart more than anything else. And at the
yeah,
same time, these techniques were kind of lost for a long time. I mean, they
yeah,
weren't very popular until very recently, like the middle of the 20th century,
yeah,
because you as we've spoken before, after the 17th, 18th century, there's a break, right? And modern astrology starts to reason, or more, or better yet, astrology is left behind, and then in the 19th century starts to reason again, but within this ethos of modernity.
yeah. And then to finish up for today, personally as an astrologer, do you prefer to work on the timing side or on the
Oh,
psychological
timings,
profile?
timing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I cut you off. I'm
No,
sorry.
no,
On the
no, not at
timing
all. But
side,
I think
or
I knew the answer. But do you prefer to work on the timing side of astrology or on the psychological
oh,
profile?
timing side, yeah. and,
Yes.
and that is basically how you can. I don't want to say that's a big difference between traditional and modern astrology, because the thing is that psychology didn't exist until 200 years ago or less,
Or
100
less.
years ago.
Yeah.
So psychology is just a modern discipline for the modern man in
Yeah.
the crisis he is right now in the modern world. You don't have psychology like 500 years ago, but you read the books, and you have these descriptions that might have some psychological interpretation from our current point of view.
Yeah.
But I mean, that is secondarily to the necessities of the client, right? Astrology had a purpose more than anything else. Like, when are things going to change? When are things going to be difficult? When are things going to be good? When are you going to die? When are you going to get sick? Are you going to get better? Right? If you want to know about your psychological profile, yeah, there's some stuff you can say there, but it's gonna be very, I mean, I don't want to say superficial, but it's there's not a lot there. I mean, you can talk about the psychological profile of the person in about 5 minutes. And
Yeah.
also with the timing techniques, you can talk about them in 10 or 15 minutes. But the thing is that I mean, it's very, in my opinion, very egocentric to just concentrate on the psychological stuff. Uh, and at the same time, ancient man knew himself much better.
I
he
think
knew
that
he
this
knew
is the
where he
thing.
was. He knew what
Yeah.
was right, what was wrong. I'm gonna die. There's heaven, there's hell, there's sin, there's right, there's wrong. Now modern man is just disconnected, right? And he needs it sometimes, these stuff to be remembered to him. So I'm sorry, there's not a lot more time left.
No,
Yes.
no, no. But and I think this is where we are yin yang, and this is why I
Yeah.
really enjoy the conversation, because I work with my clients mostly on reconnecting to themselves. I think
Yeah.
astrology is a great tool for reminding oneself of one's essence, and from there making decisions that are centered in the truth of who I am, not lost in unbalanced. And so I tend to err more on the psychology side
Yeah.
and less on the timing side, whereas you tend to do more on the timing and
No,
less
but let
on
me tell you
psychology.
what I do with that situation you told me about. I mean, I believe astrology is a great portal to reconnect with that spiritual essence that we've lost in modernity. And what I tell them is that if you want to know what you're saying, just have a spiritual practice, have a religious practice.
Yeah.
And but before that, you got to do certain stuff. You got to have diet, exercise, good sleep, and surround yourself with enriching people, enriching surroundings. And then you go to the religious practice, be it whatever you want, Sanatana Dharma, Catholicism, Islam, whatever you want. But you gotta submit yourself to that religion if you really want to know yourself, because that is what's going to plant you from a traditional perspective. So yeah.
Yeah, that's why I love the cross-pollination between
Yeah.
our different interests. So, Fernando, thank you so much for your time today
Oh,
talking
thank you,
about
Fiona.
timing. And it might be something that we revisit. Why I'm interested is because it's not my area. So then I love talking to you about it. So
Oh
there
yeah.
may be a
And it's really
follow-up
cool.
video.
It's really cool. It's really cool. Yeah,
Cool.
sure.
Great. And I look forward to talking to you again soon, Fernando. Stay well and bye to everyone. See you next week.
Ciao, ciao. Bye bye.